And good afternoon, good evening, or wherever it may be that you are, what time of day it is. And this is an MSI Extra, and we're here with Mr. Rob Puricelli, failedmuso.com. He's a blogger, he's a drummer, he's a technologist, and we're going to have a bit of a chat with him today to let you know more about him. How you doing, Rob?
I'm very well, thank you, Ian. How are you?
Not too bad. And we've also got Mr. Rich Wildman as well with us. How you doing, Rich?
I'm doing all right. Hanging out, just pushing buttons today.
And obviously asking some questions. You know,
Sure.
We want your involvement. We
absolutely.
Just, look pretty.
I better go get makeup on then.
So, Rob, let's start with a bit about you. Do you want to tell us what your involvement is with music, especially now and also in the past as well?
Well, I'd like to think that I have some sort of reasonable involvement within the music business, but it's not my full-time profession, unfortunately. I am a trainer by profession, so I teach people how to use stuff, be it computers, software, hardware, whatever. But from a very, very early age, single figures, I was deeply into music. My mum and my dad both listened to lots of music. I just found I had a natural attraction towards that particular art form, and over the years, tried to learn and get taught and get involved and do stuff, but it never really kind of came off for many reasons I won't go into because we just don't have the time. And so, as it transpired over the years, you know, as I earned more money, I could buy some gear, and I started to teach myself stuff. And it got to a point, probably about 7-8 years ago, that I thought, well, you know, with this here internet thing, maybe I can document this and get involved somehow that way. So I started a blog called Failed Muso, and the simple formula behind that name was that's kind of how I saw myself. I was a muso, and hadn't succeeded in making it my career. So the blog came along, and it was really just a way of me to indulge my obsession with music technology, because that's kind of where I'd gone from. And, you know, in the past I'd played with various bands as a drummer, got fed up with, you know, all the ego thing, and just didn't, you know, really like it. So I was just, you know, spend a lot of time in my little makeshift studio and write and talk about music technology, which was a passion. Ironically, because of that, I started to make friends and acquaintances, and people in the industry started to get to know my name, and I got some work through a friend. I bought a piece of gear, an Akai S6000 sampler, and I was searching online for samples, found a guy who was giving some away for free, legitimately, and he created them himself, and they were for this particular sampler. So I sent him an email one day and said, thank you for giving us this free stuff. And he sent me an email back, and he said, you're the first person that's ever said thank you for me giving away this free stuff. And from that moment, we struck up a really good friendship, which lasts to this day. He turns out to be Akai's chief sample guy. I don't know what his official job title was, but he worked for Akai. And this is the days when Akai were in Japan, not in America as they are now. And so he was well in there and started to throw little tidbits of work my way. And none of it was really cash payments. It was just, you know, payment in kind. You know, have this free sample pack, you know, get to have this bit of gear first, you know. And that snowballed when Akai in Japan went bust and got bought out by Jack O'Donnell, who owns the whole Newmark and Alesis thing. Steve moved over and kind of took me with him, and I started doing some stuff for Alesis as well. And again, it was just all pure fortune, being in the right place at the right time, knowing the right people. I started to get little bits of work with various other companies, and it's to the point today where I've been hired by Fairlight Instruments, or as they're now known, Peter Vogel Instruments, and I need to make that clear because they're not called Fairlight Instruments anymore. GeForce Software, who make various software synths, of course, Akai, Alesis, and some other small independent software developers who I prefer working with because it's really kind of like cottage industry, and they feel like kindred spirits. So that's where I am today, and now I have my little studio here at home, and probably the pinnacle of all of this. I mean, a lot of it's been great, but it's this thing that sat behind me, this Fairlight CMI that I've recently acquired, doing quotation fingers there, because I'm helping restore it. And the Fairlight has been a massive obsession of mine. So this is kind of the pinnacle of everything that I've worked towards. So there you go. That's a bit of history.
Well, we'll get to the Fairlight in a minute, because obviously we've had you on the show a couple of times now, and we've had a few interesting conversations about the Fairlight, which I'd like to carry on today. But you're also, you write your own music. You use Reason a lot.
Yes, I do. Yeah,
and you're quite heavily involved with the Reason community as well, aren't you?
Yeah, it kind of comes and goes because, as any internet community does, it suffers from its ups and its downs. You have when you've got a huge amount of people from all around the world, from different cultures with different personalities and different tastes, and they all kind of congregate into one place. Sometimes it's brilliant and you get so much energy and creativity and positivity, and other times it's completely the opposite, unfortunately. But yeah, Reason was a tool that I started to dabble with many years ago, and again that was through contacts that it turns out that I ran this forum for Akai users, just a little independent thing, and it turns out one of the guys at Propellerheads found that incredibly useful, and so said, "Here, have a copy of Reason on us," and that's kind of got me into it. And I just found that it worked for me. That was the application that worked for my music making modus operandi. That just hit all my buttons. Having tried many others at great expense. But yeah, a few years ago, there was a massive period of negativity on the Propellerhead community forums. And I got into a conversation with somebody. And I said, well, why don't you just focus this energy on doing what we're all here to do, really, which is make music. We wouldn't be here if we didn't want to make music. So why are people focusing bad energy on bad-mouthing lots of other people? Why can't they just make good music? So they said, yeah, what we need is some kind of competition. And I said, well, tell you what, let's do that. And it was all very airy-fairy. There was nothing really sort of committed about it. It was just like, hey, everyone, write a piece of original music. We'll all judge it, and somebody, I'll figure out a prize. Turns out, Propellerheads watching this from a distance gave me some prizes to give away, and it kind of started to snowball from there. And then I started using some of my contacts that I'd made in the industry to get guest judges in. So what we would do is we'd run a song challenge. We'd throw in a pile of limitations and restrictions because, in my opinion, that drives creativity. And we would get people in to judge them. And these were respected members of the music community. So we started off with a guy called Mark Reeder, who is or was the factory records representative in East Germany in the late 70s and the early 80s, and he's since gone on to start up his own labels, and he's a producer and a remixer, and he's well respected in the industry. We then got Martin Ware from Heaven 17, who I kind of know, and that was brilliant to get a name as big and as massive as that in the electronic music game. Who else we had? We had Dave Spears from GeForce, and a few others thrown in there, and it got to a point where we did about 6 or 7 of them over a period of about a year or so. And then work got in the way and I wasn't able to do them for a little while. So it's kind of slowed down again. But we're hoping, because you gave me an idea a few weeks ago, to do some more in the very near future. But yeah, I'm big on driving people's creativity using technology.
Excellent stuff. So come on, we'll talk about this Fairlight. There's so many, modern synths out there now, which at a press of a button will do what you want them to do, emulate any sound that you want it to emulate. Why are you going back to a sort of 80s technology? What's the passion and the drive behind that?
Well, the passion and the drive is a multitude of things. It's funny. I was actually I'm in halfway through writing an essay for my blog, which I do every now and again, like a real kind of 4,000-6,000 word piece, and this piece is exactly about that question. Why the Fairlight? And I thought about it long and hard, and it came up with the fact that it's not just the way it sounds. It's not just the people that used it. It's not just the records it was used on. But for me, on a personal level, there's a big emotional attachment, because as a young teenage lad who had massive ambitions of making it in the music industry using music technology, this was the pinnacle. In the 80s, if you wanted an all singing, all dancing, can make any sound in the world, one person can sound like an entire 40-piece orchestra, the Fairlight was where you needed to go. And so I had this kind of lusting after it from a technology aspect, but also a huge amount of the music that I listened to and was moved by featured the Fairlight. And I don't believe that I gravitated towards that music because I knew there was a Fairlight, so therefore I went to listen to it. It just so happened that people like Trevor Horn, who was using it with Art of Noise and used it on the Malcolm McLaren Duck Rock album, and all those kind of early instances, Kate Bush on The Dreaming and Peter Gabriel on his, I think it was his third solo album. It was that music that I guess I was attracted to the uniqueness of some of the sounds that they were using. If you listen to some of those songs, and the way they use the Fairlight sonically is just incredible. So there's an emotional attachment to it as well. And of course, the visual thing, it looks amazing. It looks like nothing else. Nothing else has really looked like it since. It's this huge mainframe computer, but then the keyboard is this like giant white slab of marble where the keys have been carved out of the edge, and it just looks like nothing else. So there's a huge range of reasons why I love this machine, and I've always loved it. But of course, it's been very expensive, and you can't normally afford one of these. I mean, they only made 200 or 300 Fairlights in total across all three series. And they started at $25,000, $30,000, and by the time this one came out, you could get the thick end of $100,000 to buy one of these machines. So it was completely out of my reach, and it would have been out of my reach even by today's standards. So I tried to make up for that using computers in music, and I've used everything from Commodore 64 through to Atari STs and PCs, and now I use Mac and PC, and of course now move on to things like iPad, which I tend to sort of dabble with. But this Fairlight, there's just something about it that nothing else seems to have. And I've often been asked, why do you hanker after one so much? Because literally with an iPad nowadays, the processing power and the capacity and the functionality is light years ahead of what the Fairlight could do. But it isn't just about what it can do, it's about how it does it. And I think that's the same for any kind of musical instrument of yesteryear, be it a Fairlight, be it an analog synthesizer, be it a natural instrument like a piano or something. There's something about a real piano that many synthesized pianos, whether they're sampled or physically modeled, don't get. And we spoke about it, I think, on the show a couple of weeks ago. We were reviewing a song, and there was a lot of piano, and you could hear the mechanics of the piano. And it's very rare that you get those mechanical sounds in electronic versions of piano. So that's why I would always go for a real piano over a synthesized one if I could. And it's the same with the Fairlight. I would always go for that for certain sounds, because there's nothing else like it, because the technology of the day in the early 80s was such that this was the pinnacle. This was cutting edge, but it still had its limitations. And what Peter Vogel and Kim Ryrie did was they came up with techniques to get around those limitations, and it was those techniques that coloured the sound and made the Fairlight sound unique. So when you sample a piano into a Fairlight, sure, it sounds like a piano, but it doesn't sound like a piano on any other instrument. It sounds like a Fairlight piano because it's had that coloration. And for me, that's something you can't. Well, you can recreate it, as Peter Vogel has demonstrated with his 30th anniversary version of the CMI. But he had to buy £5,000 digital processing cards for each version of the machine he built, along with a few £1,000s worth of input-output material, to then be able to run the powerful physical modeling techniques to recreate what a 30-year-old machine could do in hardware. So this is a special machine with a special way of doing things. And I think, like anything, it's like, like with rare cars. I think, if you find, why would you want to drive a 1950s Ferrari? Well, because it's a classic, because nothing else looks like it. Nothing else quite sounds like it. Yeah, you can go faster, but there's something magical, something kind of untangible about the whole thing, and that's what draws me to it.
So it's the classic car of synths, is what you're trying to tell us?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's the Stradivarius of synths. I'll probably get shot for that, but
we'll quote you on that one. Now that one sitting behind you, it's got a bit of history as well, hasn't it? It was owned by Ian Stanley.
That's right, yeah. Ian Stanley of Tears for Fears.
And you have a load of discs sitting with it as well, don't you?
Yeah. Ian was a member of Tears for Fears, although, most people will know Tears for Fears for Kurt and Roland, but they're actually like a 4 or 5 piece band. And Ian was quite instrumental, excuse the pun, in the band, as he was a co-writer and a performer, along with Manny Elias on drums and Chris Hughes, the production guy who, of course, used to be Merrick in Adam and the Ants. And Ian is a bit of one of these kind of musical geniuses and could work his magic in a lot of things. So, yeah, this machine used to belong to him, and Peter Wilk from Horizontal Productions in Australia, who's the guy that bought this from, or via, the studios in Box, that Wiltshire, that belonged to Chris Hughes still. So yeah, it came with a whole bunch of 8-inch floppy disks, and we weren't quite sure what was on them. And it also came with the original big giant Winchester hard drive, which weighs an absolute ton, 190 megabytes, and this was massive for the day. But we got this thing home, and I started to flick through these 8-inch discs, and a lot of them have just got like sample names on them, so horn or violin or orchestra or something. So there's no real reference to anything. But then I started to find some labels. The first one I found that really got me excited was one that got the name Badman's on it. And if there's any Tears for Fears fans watching or listening, then you'll know that's the opening title of the song on their third album, Seeds of Love, Badman's Song. And it's a brilliant piece of work. And so that was very exciting. Then I found a couple of discs with the name Bryan Adams written on them. And I did some research and found out that, sure enough, Ian Stanley had worked with Bryan Adams on a particular album. So that's exciting. So we've got some of that stuff on there. Ian also worked with Roland on a side project outside of Tears for Fears called Man Crab. And they only did I think they only released one song, and that was on the Karate Kid 2 soundtrack, I believe. And there's a disc in there with Man Crab written on it. And so there's other things. And of course, there's a whole bunch of tapes. And some of those haven't got anything on in terms of labeling, but, we don't know what they've got in terms of content. And, of course, there's that hard disk drive. So all of that we will investigate and see if any of that is still around. But there is good history behind a lot of these Fairlight discs that pop up. But just recently there was a guy on eBay sold a bunch of Pet Shop Boys and Frankie Goes to Hollywood Fairlight discs. And they all worked. So they do stand the test of time if they're stored properly, and these look like they have been stored properly. So fingers crossed, there'll be some interesting stuff, and it'll be great just to preserve that because it's musical history,
I guess the hardest part about something like that is going to be the fact that they're on old technology. I mean, you're going to have to move these things over to some new technology somehow.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you have an 8.5-inch floppy reader and,
Well,
and a way to convert the hard drive over.
Yeah, there are algorithms, proprietary algorithms that Peter has to convert stuff to new media, and I don't think you can actually see down there with my camera because it's fixed. But what we've got in that one, because even if we could recover and start using the original hard drive again, it would just be pointless because it would probably break down pretty soon, and once those things go, that's it. They're so old. So Peter's already he's done a lot of these machines. He makes part of his living from doing this thing. So he's already figured out a way of getting all of those onto a regular SCSI hard drive, a 3.5-inch SCSI hard drive, and so that works as the system drive. And I actually booted it up today. And we're almost there in getting it running. I was hoping to have it running for you tonight, but it wasn't to be. But yeah, we can get everything over onto a 3.5-inch regular hard drive, and that's not a problem. The floppy drive, we're not actually going to put a floppy drive in here because, again, they're probably even more delicate than the hard drives, and they were only ever used for software updates. So I imagine a lot of these discs might have originated from Ian's CMI Series 2, which he used on Songs from the Big Chair, the Big Tears for Fears album. So a lot of those might have kind of come over from there, or he might have just used the discs as temporary backups. But I don't quite know what we're doing with the tape drive. So we'll see. I think ultimately all that stuff will go back to Australia, where Peter is based, and he will do his jiggery pokery and manage hopefully to extract. But on the hard drive that we've got in the machine, we've actually got libraries that we've recovered from other Fairlights over the years, and there's quite a nice bit of historical material in there, and that's all I'm allowed to say about that.
So just to clarify, this isn't something you've bought, plugged in, and it's worked. You're going through a restoration period with this, not just from the point of view of recovering data, but rebuilding the machine. You're putting the thing back together, aren't you, basically?
Yeah, because this is, every Fairlight came with its own bespoke flight cases, and, these are, they'll resist nuclear war. They're so huge and so heavy and so bulky. So this has been living in that for I don't know how many years, at least I would say 20 years probably. And it smells like it's been stored away somewhere, a little bit musty, a little bit fusty, and it has that kind of thing about it. So there's a little bit of kind of dampness, damage to the outer casings, and mainly discoloration more than anything else. But the cards inside were they were old cards, as in they hadn't got updated ROMs on them. They hadn't, Fairlight used to release updates to the cards, so you could open up the card cage and slide in a new card and take out the old card. So what Peter is doing, and what he does with all his restorations, is he takes all the cards out, leaves in the ones that don't need upgrading, and then puts in all the final versions of all of the cards, so that what he sells on is the best that Fairlight can be. And so with this being Series 3, then it's going to have all 8 of the voice cards in, which have 2 voices per card, so you'll have the full 16 channels. It's going to have the full multiple mixer outputs at the back, because being a professional studio machine, every voice card had its own individual output that you can feed into its own separate bus on the desk for individual processing. So there are mixer outputs for that. It's got SMPTE, it's got word clock upgrades. We've got a video upgrade, so that you see on the back there, there's actually a Dell flat panel monitor next to the original monitor, which you just see to the left of it there. That's because Peter's managed to invent this adapter that goes in the back and allows the Fairlight to output to a regular TFT LCD screen, which is very useful because, of course, these old CRT screens have a pretty much a finite lifespan, and they're already quite old as it is, and they're made of glass. They're very breakable. So thankfully, that one actually works. So we're not going to have to worry about replacing the screen, but that one's there to test, and we'll when we move this machine onto its new owner, then it will go with the ability to attach to a flat panel. So we're replacing all the cards. I've over the last 24 hours or so, I've put in about 10 cards in that machine. So we've got a few more to go. We're just sort of testing stage by stage. We got to a point tonight. Fortunately, we hit a stumbling block, and so I can't show you it today. I was just so hoping I could just play a little ditty for you on there. But once that's done, and that's the simple thing, because they're built like nothing else. They're so well made, these mainframes. They're definitely made to last, and definitely worth the money that they were charging. The next thing is obviously the keyboard itself, the music keyboard. And that needs a lot of work because there are a lot of dead keys on there. And I say dead, when you hit them, they don't return. They just stay sunken in the keyboard. So we're going to need to dismantle that and replace I think it's about 23 keys in there at the moment. That will need replacing. We might find some more, so that will need doing, and just updating some of the connecting cables, making sure they're all okay. But yeah, it's a restoration process to get this back up to the best that it can be.
Sounds like an interesting project and a bit of hard work, but I'd imagine very rewarding when you actually do hit those keys and it makes a sound.
That's the bit I'm waiting for. I mean, last night we powered it up for the first time, and there's a video over on the blog if you want to have a look. And that was a moment because although Peter had tested the power supplies before he jetted off somewhere else, we weren't sure whether we get through to the BIOS, which is the onboard little kind of operating system that then boots to the software. So we upgraded a couple of the cards last night and plugged it in and very gingerly pressed the little red button on the front, and it all powered up, and we got the BIOS on the screen. It told us that it was, I'm here, I'm alive. And that's all it did. And then I got an email about 3 hours ago, because Pete's currently in San Francisco. He's on a bit of a holiday there. So he emails me in the morning and then goes off and does stuff. And he sent me this email this morning his time, to say, if you now fit these 8 voice cards and put in the hard drive and do this and that and the other, you should be able to get to a point where you can plug in a MIDI keyboard and maybe load up some sounds and hear. But unfortunately, the operating system is getting almost to boot, and then it stops, so we're not quite sure what's wrong there. But hopefully it won't be long. But yeah, I can't wait to hear it. That's the thing, is hearing a real Fairlight coming out of its main outputs. There's nothing quite like it.
In your house?
In my house, in my room.
Now, before you're on about sort of sending this on to a new owner, and you kind of said it with a lump in your throat, I felt.
Yeah, uh-huh.
You want this, don't you?
I do, yeah. I'm not going to lie. When I got the email from Peter, when I was on business in Germany, I was in the middle of a room in the middle of South Germany. And it says, would you give me a hand in restoring this? And before I'd even finished the email, I was like, yes, send. Just to have an experience with it. And I don't think I could have asked for a better experience, because if somebody just said, there you go, here's a Fairlight, have a play. Oh, great. Wonderful. But if somebody says, here's a Fairlight and you're going to need to get to know this machine from the inside out, that's even better. And because I have such an emotional attachment with this machine, this icon, there, as soon as I got it, it was, that was a lump in the throat moment when I went to pick it up. And then when I unpacked it and set it up behind me here, and I just sat here looking at it, thinking, I can't believe it's actually here. And if I could have turned it on and made some noise with it, then I think I'd still be doing it now, because I just can't wait. I'm so excited. I'm like a kid at Christmas. But as you say, I want this, and I will do anything that I can that is legal, that won't put my family at risk.
Yeah, you got to admit though, it does look good in your studio there. It looks just perfect, the perfect place for it and everything.
I keep telling my wife that, and she keeps looking at me and rolling her eyes and walking off again. But because I mean, the thing is, we as a family, I mean, we need a bigger house for various reasons, mainly because the kids are growing up. I work from home, so I need a space, and the kids need their space, and so we really do need to move house. And of course, as you'll appreciate anywhere nowadays, moving house, whether you buy or you rent, is not a cheap experience. So I'm going to need as much financial clout to do that. But at the same time, here is this perfect opportunity for me to acquire the object of my dreams. So I've been looking at various ways, and we had a chat about a week and a half ago, didn't we? And Ian came up with some great ideas, and I've been mulling those over and coming up with twists on that and seeing what might work. And I'm being remunerated for my work on this. So even if I wasn't going to hang on to this at the end of it, I'm going to be compensated in some way. That's been agreed. So that will help, I'm sure. So I don't know. I'm quietly confident that something will happen because I don't believe in destiny or fate, and I'm not a religious person at all or anything like that. But I do believe that sometimes if you really want something, you'll find a way that you can do it and do it properly. And if I can't, well, I can't. And I know for a fact that if that is the case and I have to send this to somebody else, it will be with a big lump in my throat and moist eyes, I'm sure. But, this is as close as I've ever got. And, when you get to that point, you just want to hang on to it and don't want to let go. But, we'll see. We'll see.
So, I mean, let's look at the bigger picture. You're a music technologist. You obviously have an interest in the sort of retro instrument, as it were, these days. I mean, how are you seeing that across the board in music? We're hearing of increased sales in vinyl. We're hearing of people sort of going back to quarter-inch tape for recording rather than digitally. Are you finding this yourself with your experience?
I won Letter of the Month in Future Music magazine some years ago, where I wrote this very long piece. It was just before I started doing the blog. It's probably why I started doing it, and I wrote this really long letter. Talking about this whole analog versus digital thing, and this retro versus modern stuff, and how and my argument was that they can both happily coexist, and one is not inherently better than the other. They just do things differently, and some people really like to have massive analog modular synthesizers where they have to plug loads of cables in just for it to make one rudimentary sound. Other people like to use complex pieces of software where they can draw things on the screen and make sounds out of literally nothing. I was playing around with an instrument the other day where you literally can take a picture, just a picture of anything, you picture of your face, and you can cut out a piece of that picture, and then this piece of software interprets what's on screen as audio. And it's amazing. I mean, you can come up with some of the most incredible sounds. But I don't think that one is better than the other. And I see this, this kind of the reports that we're seeing at the moment about vinyl becoming more popular again. That sales are up, and I think and people doing a lot more retro recording on cassettes. I mean, I've got a friend who's a musician, and his ambition, and he'll realise it pretty soon, I'm sure, he's going to release an album on audio cassette, the old C60 type audio cassettes.
Yeah.
And I think that's a kickback, and I think that's a reaction to the way that the music industry and the music scene is nowadays, because you only have to look at any of the charts, be they in the UK or America, and it's all heavily manufactured, heavily produced, to the point of so-called perfection, and everything that you see is goes to that whole marketing filter where they do all their magic work, because at the end of the day, these artists and the labels that they're on, all they want to do is sell the music and make more money so they can sell more music and make more money. And they're just looking for the cheapest, most common denominator that gets the largest segment of the music buying public, which I think probably, and I can't back this up with statistics or facts, but I'm pretty sure that it's still prepubescent or teenage young girls. They're the big music buyers. They're the ones that go out and buy the most of this music.
Yeah, you know, Ian tells me that all the time. They're always buying his music. I can't figure it out, but that's what he says.
Well, right, nursery rhymes, it works.
Yeah. And you see this stuff, coming out. And even today, I listened because people were going on about it. The whole new Lady Gaga single got leaked, so she's released it early. And Katy Perry has released hers, and now the press are saying, "So, would you like Lady Gaga or Katy Perry?" And I listened to both of them, and I was just like, "Meh." They're nice. They're nice songs, but they don't do anything. They don't break any boundaries. They don't push any envelopes. They don't tread any new ground. And I don't subscribe to these people that say, well, there is no new ground to tread. Rubbish. I got an album or a box set of an album called Scared to Get Happy. If anybody's, I don't know if it's available outside of the UK, but it's a 5-disc box set of independent pop music between 1980 and 1989. There's very few synthesizers in there. There's a lot of spangly, twangly guitars, but every song is different. Every song has a different feel. Every song has a different emotion. It's all made by real people in small studios on independent labels, and it's amazing. It's stunning stuff, and you just can't get that nowadays. And people say, "Oh, it's just because you're in your 40s now, and your parents were saying that 20, 30 years ago." No, they weren't. My parents loved music back in the 80s. And I listen to this stuff now, it's just awful. So I think a lot of people are saying, and a lot of people feel the same. So they're saying, it's a backlash, I think. Let's listen to music that's a little bit crackly. Let's make music in a retro way. And it was the same with synthesizers, sort of 10, 15, maybe 20 years ago, when this whole analog revolution came back. All of a sudden we didn't want synths with a single LCD panel and a couple of switches on. We wanted knobs and sliders and faders and stuff to get our hands on. And I think it's a bit of a backlash. Yeah, tangibility is all, music, is all about tangibility. It's about touching stuff and moving stuff and making things happen and sound different. And there was that backlash. And so I think that's maybe, part of it as well.
I mean, I said this to you before, I think, I remember days of coming down on a Sunday morning, sitting with my father as we played Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds on 12-inch gatefold. Yeah. And you had a big piece of artwork in front of you with the lyrics and the credits and stuff to read while the music was playing. And my son has never seen a vinyl record being played on a record player.
Yeah. And
my son's never made his own cassette tape of him singing or mixtapes or his parents having an argument or whatever you used to do with your little cassette player as you wandered round with it. So I think it's a great thing that's coming back.
Yeah. Did you used to do sound on sound recording? Where you'd record something and then you've kind of pushed the head, and you then you sometimes have if you had a double cassette player, you could record something on one and then record it back onto the other one whilst playing something else into it. You used to have to sort of mess around with a few wires, so you then kind of overdub, and then you take that cassette and put it over into the other cassette deck, and then you'd play that back and then overdub something else, and they don't have to do that anymore. They just, download a program for free, legitimately or otherwise, and press a couple of buttons, and they can start recording all sorts of things. My friend Steve, this guy who got me sort of into a lot of things many years ago, he said what's happened is technology has removed a quality filter from music making.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
and I kind of rallied against that because I said, no, what it's done is liberated people. People that didn't have access to all that fantastic technology have now got it, and we're going to see people come through that wouldn't have otherwise been able to do so.
I agree with that too. I don't think that was his point. I think his point was, and your point's valid. Both points are valid. Everybody now has access, but the quality filter's not there. That means everybody has the right to make crap.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
you know,
And we all now have the ability to distribute crap
exactly.
and market that crap in any, because we just, with the advent of MySpace, rest in peace, and of course now we've got Facebook and Twitter and everything. I can make some music. I can market that music pretty effectively for little or no cost. I can distribute that music for little or no cost. I can make, if I want to make physical product, I can make sleeves, I can make CDs. If I want to distribute it digitally, I can do that. So yeah, I mean, and I now agree that it has removed a quality filter, and that's not. I kind of thought that was a very snobbish thing to say, but it's not. It's true. It's opened up, and we now no longer have people making those kind of decisions as to that's really bad. We don't want to hear it. We now have to make more of those decisions ourselves. But on the other hand, lots of musicians and artists have made their living, made their fortune because of that technology. It's empowered a lot of people. And it's empowered me, because at the end of the day, I'm just a drummer. That's the only thing I'm good at. That's the only thing that if you said to me, Rob, play me something right now, I'd say, right, show me the drum kit, because I couldn't, I've got keyboards here, I've got keyboards there, I've got computers everywhere. I couldn't knock a tune out. I haven't got that skill. I haven't got that talent as much as I'd love to, and I keep meaning to learn. The only thing I can actually do is play drums, and that gets a bit boring because there's no music in there. But the technology's empowered me, and I put music out there, and I leave it up to other people to judge whether it's good or bad.
I mean, I think that's the same for a lot of people. I mean, you're a drummer, you can play a drum kit, whereas a lot of people making music in their house haven't got access to a drum kit or a live drummer or neighbours that understand they're going to be playing a drum kit in their house. And you've got stuff like BFD and Easy Drummer out there now, which also gives you the capabilities to lay down convincing, realistic sounding drum tracks in your living room without going to that expense.
Somebody came up to me once and said, "Oh, Rob, you're a bit of a music person. Have a listen to this." And he gave me this CD, and I listened to it. I thought, that's okay. It sounded like pretty much any kind of poppy, clubby, house type music. And I said, "That's good. Who's that?" He said, "It's me." I said, "Really?" And I, sort of stood back, and I didn't realise that you were into it. He said, "Oh, I just got a thing on my PlayStation that allows me to put all these things together, and I made that." And he was really proud of it. And the minute he said that that's what he'd done, all of a sudden, I didn't know what to say, because he's not actually built anything properly musical. He's not taken a blank sheet and created something from the ground up. He's taken loops and samples that other people have made, that millions of other people are using around the world, and he's just threaded them together in a particular way. All he's done, he's an arranger. He's not a musician. But, I bit my tongue, and I didn't, because he was a friend and I didn't want to upset him. But, a lot of this software, allows people to make music, but it's not really making music. It's arranging other people's music. But there are some brilliantly talented musicians out there that we'll never ever hear, because either they're quite happy making it in their bedrooms, or maybe the people that that can make them well known and famous aren't interested because it doesn't appeal to their target market, which is the big market. It's those young teenage girls that go after all these
they go after all Ian stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I always like to ask people when we do this sort of stuff is, what are you listening to at the moment? What's on your iPod, your iPad? What are you sort of into?
Well, embarrassingly, I've been listening to a lot of Fairlight-based music naturally over the last sort of 5-6 weeks, merely because I've just been inspired to listen to that all again. But I have a big passion for multi-channel music as well. That's a really big thing that I really enjoy. And I got into that many years ago when it first came out. My dad actually had a quadraphonic system back in the 70s, although he never bought any quadraphonic albums to play in it, which I always thought was a bit strange. But I was intrigued by it. And then in the 90s, when Dolby Pro Logic and Dolby Digital started to proliferate through home cinemas, I discovered that there was people making albums in 5.1 surround sound, and I got a few of them and listened to them. They blew me away because, to me, it's the ultimate listening experience, because you can, if it's done well, you can position the instruments in such ways that it just broadens that whole audio sound field, and just makes the whole thing sound just incredible. You can hear stuff that you've never heard before that's been mushed up in a stereo mix. I think the first album I actually bought was Queen's A Night at the Opera, which is just an absolute revelation in 5.1.
You try Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. There's an album of theirs out in 5.1. Amazing, amazing.
Yeah, and the thing is, I've been inspired to go out and buy 5.1 albums by artists I would not normally buy, and have been blown away by the recording, not just because it's in that 5.1 surround, but because you can actually hear this stuff. I've got the Beach Boys Pet Sounds in 5.1. They did on DVD audio, and it's just incredible to hear the detail on that. And so I've been listening to a lot of stuff in 5.1, so that and it's covered a whole gamut of genres. So my last purchase, I think, in 5.1 was Hawkwind. And they just released or re-released Warrior on the Edge of Time, which is an incredible album as it is. But in 5.1, wow, you don't need any mind-bending drugs when you listen to that. It's just incredible. REM, I got all their back catalogue in 5.1, Talking Heads as well. So, I listen to all sorts of things, and it's whatever takes me at the moment. I think the last piece of music I heard today before Lady Gaga and Katy Perry was Aha.
You said music, right?
Yeah, quite, exactly. I put Aha's first album on because that was a heavily Fairlight used album. In actual fact, Ian Stanley worked with Aha, but I think that was way past the CMI's time. So yeah, all sorts of things. I mean, if I was to show you my iTunes collection, it goes from Debussy to Duran Duran to Def Leppard, all sorts.
Excellent stuff. Rich, you got any questions?
At this point, I think all my questions have been answered, except for the one. I want to hear what the Fairlight sounds like, but I know we can't, so we're going to have to wait.
Well, yeah, and as soon as I get it working, I'll let you guys know, and I'll knock up something impromptu and let you hear it. But if you really want to hear what a Fairlight sounds like, and just a Fairlight, because obviously they were used in so many records, and it might have just been a sound here or a patch there. Early Art of Noise is incredibly almost pure Fairlight in many respects, and when you listen to that and you hear what they were doing with this machine, or even Peter Gabriel, his third album, or Kate Bush's The Dreaming, it's so much Fairlight in there that if you want to hear what these things can do.
If I could be so bold as to also say, if you want to hear a Fairlight in its with nothing else around it, Herbie Hancock was on Mr. Rogers at one point and demoed the Fairlight to a bunch of children there, talking about the future of music. It was really quite amazing to watch. Yeah,
and talking of YouTube, if I can just add in, when I did some work for Peter Vogel, it's for his iOS app. I did the launch video, which you can find on the Peter Vogel Instruments YouTube channel if you want to go and have a look at that. And Peter supplied me with a huge amount of photos and sounds and videos from his own personal private archive to use in that piece. And one of the pieces of video that was there was Bob Moog demonstrating the CMI. And there's a guy who, in fact,
you posted something about that to your blog and Twitter accounts, yeah.
I did today, yeah. I gathered them all up and put them into a playlist, and there's about 5 videos there, and it's Dr. Bob Moog and the Fairlight. It's just like the world should have imploded when these two things came together. And his enthusiasm for the machine and his natural shyness is so endearing. It's just an absolute joy to watch. But yeah, there are some great albums and some great works out there. Herbie Hancock was a great proponent of it because it allowed him to do so much. And people like Kate Bush, Stuart Copeland, Jean-Michel Jarre, Peter Gabriel was the big one because it was Peter Gabriel's cousin that owned the UK distribution network for Fairlight. So that's how Peter Gabriel got involved. So yeah, there's some incredible stuff out there. It's well worth checking out. Anderson, Bruford, Lake, and Howe. I think that's the right way that they put it together. That kind of yes that wasn't yes. They did a couple of albums. That's heavily Fairlight as well. There's some great stuff on there.
Excellent stuff. So, what is the future for Rob Puricelli, Failed Muso? Obviously, the direct future is to get this Fairlight working and to give us the exclusive of the play. Sorry, it slipped out there. But what is the future of Rob Puricelli, Failed Muso at the moment? Where else are you headed?
Well, it's kind of difficult to say because I was made redundant from my job last year, and I didn't know what I was going to do, and it kind of dawned on me that maybe I should indulge my music technology passion and maybe try and finally get a proper job in the industry. And I spoke to a number of people, mainly Chris and Dave at G4 Software, who were just unbelievably brilliant and so generous with their time and knowledge and advice. And they actually said, we've got work that we can give you right now. But, when I looked at the bigger picture, it just wasn't going to be a suitable thing for me and my family, money-wise. And I hate to talk about money at the best of times, but it just wouldn't work. So Dave actually gave me this piece of advice, and he said the one thing he regrets about getting into the business, which he absolutely loves, and he's been in it for years and years, but he regrets making his hobby his job, because sometimes he really hates his job. And we all do. I think we all, really hate going to work sometimes. And I wouldn't ever want to get like that about this kind of stuff. I always want to be passionate and enthusiastic. So I think I let myself off the hook there and didn't go into it. But the job I did take, which I absolutely love as well, because it's doing training and a lot of traveling around the world. I'm in LA in a couple of weeks, which is something I never thought I'd be able to do for a living, get paid to go out there. It means that I don't have huge amounts of time to do much. So what's in the future? Well, the Fairlight, definitely that's getting that fixed, up and running, and having as much time with it as I possibly can before the decision is made as to who becomes its final owner. Hopefully that'll be me, but you never know. Other than that, then, there's lots of things that I'm working on that I can't talk about for various reasons because I'm not allowed to.
Come on, it's just the three of us.
Yeah, Joe, I would. But I mean, I love talking about this stuff. And I actually saw something a few weeks ago in a certain studio in England that blew my mind. It was just incredible. And you guys are going to see it soon if you're into that kind of thing. And it's going to be brilliant, but I can't tell you about that. I'm starting to try to do a bit more on the blog and get that more of an active thing again. So I'll always be doing that, and the reviews on there. I like to do written reviews and video reviews as well. So I have a few companies that send me their material so I can do stuff on there. So I always like to do a bit more of that. But the next thing that's really at the forefront of my mind is connected to the Fairlight, and that's actually making some music with the Fairlight. And I've had some inspiration from you guys when we spoke a little while back, and I've had some other thoughts. And there's an album out at the moment. Well, it came out a few years ago, but it's just been reissued by a guy called Ben Edwards, who goes by the name of Benj, and he's a massive synth head, and he's got a studio that is just wall-to-wall vintage synthesizers. He's got everything that was ever made, and he made this album called 20 Systems, and it's 20 songs, and each song is made using a single instrument, and it's done in a chronological fashion from like 1968 to 1987, I think. So there's one for each year between those 2 years. And he presented it in this lovely hardback book, and I'm thinking, I'd love to do something like that that's based around the Fairlight. And this is kind of alludes to what we were talking about, Ian, a few weeks ago. Yep. And so I've got some ideas sort of boiling, but I've always wanted to make an album. And I've got enough songs on SoundCloud and what have you that I could put, a dozen songs together. They probably work. But I want to do a proper album with a proper release, physical release with a CD. I want to do it in surround sound. and I'm having lots of thoughts about that at the moment. So maybe
That sounds like something we want to be looking out for.
hopefully I'll get the time and the funding to do that. So and if ultimately it means I can keep back, then that's what I'm worried about.
And hopefully some more appearances on the new industry filter that is MSI.
Absolutely, I love doing your show. You guys are so much fun to work with, and I was so fortunate to have kind of been called up for the first one, which I believe I was like an emergency substitute for someone, and I just feel so lucky that happened, and then to have been asked back is even better. And great. Have me back anytime you want.
And a big thanks to John Hodgson, who also works with G-Force.
He does. He does a serious amount of work there.
He's the tech Cody guy, isn't he? So
he is. Yeah, we have him to thank for some of that wonderful stuff.
Excellent stuff. Well, thanks for joining us today, Rob.
Pleasure.
It's interesting having a chat with you, and I hope people who listen to this do find it very interesting, because there's a lot of interesting content about the Fairlight and that there. And we look forward to having you back on the show. Rich, any final thoughts?
No, the only thing I want to let everybody know is if they want to find out more about what Rob is up to, please go to his site, failedmuso.com, and you can read all about it, watch the reviews, watch the progress on the Fairlight CMI, and let us know if Rob goes ahead and puts out audio before he does it on MSI.
I will try and keep that as exclusive as I can, but trust me, it's going to be difficult to contain that moment. But please, if anybody does want any more information, or if they want to get in touch, go to the blog. So it's fairmuso.com, and then either click on the blog, and my email's there. You can get in touch and ask me stuff, and I'll happily respond as soon as I can. So please go and visit. And I don't make any money from this. I just want to point out that blog is completely independent. There's no funding. I don't take advertising. I don't want advertising. Nobody pays me to do any of it. I don't make any money off of it. It's literally just done for the passion and the love of it, which I think is important when you're trying to be honest about this stuff. So I'm not looking to drive people into my site so I can make more money, because it doesn't happen. I wish it did.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on MSI soon, hopefully.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, let's say anytime.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.